Welcome to Art with JanineLiza. In this video, I'm sharing a little bit of hand stitching as I sew together a cute little hummingbird flower design in felt. As I sew this together, I'm going to be sharing it in a series of videos so that I can break it down into a couple of stitches or a couple of techniques per video. I'll just carefully separate the pieces, and then I'm going to get my embroidery needle, which has a large eye in it for threading embroidery thread through. And I'm going to choose the colors of thread that I'm going to work with. This felt kit is designed to be stuffed inside so that it's kind of puffy when it's finished and almost like a pincushion. So I won't be needing the white felt right now, but I'm going to place the yellow flower on top of the red one, and I'm going to start stitching that. First I need to pin it down just to keep it in place so it doesn't move around on me while I'm sewing. A couple of pins should do the job. I've chosen the yellow embroidery thread, so it's going to blend in nicely with the yellow felt. I like to wrap the thread around the shape that I'm going to sew and then wrap it around again just to make sure that I have more than enough thread to do the job. So we'll thread one end through the needle and fold the thread over a little and then tie a knot in the other end. Now to pick a place to start, I'm going to start on the back of the yellow felt. As I pull the embroidery thread through, I need to hide that little piece just past the knot, and I just tuck it in like that. Then I'm just going to weave the needle in and out, trying to stay the same distance away from the edge of the yellow all the way around. This is pretty much the most basic stitch there is, and once I'm done the yellow, just sort of tacking it into place, I'm going to do a blanket stitch on the pink flower. Untangling the thread as I just did is a good idea before trying to pull it through. Sometimes you might think when you're sewing, oh, I'll just pull it and it will untangle, but that doesn't always go well, so it's a good idea to sort of try and sort of untangle it before pulling it through. Another trick I learned is, well, I learned it the hard way, is to put my finger on the needle. Oh, I'm just bringing this up close here to show you the running stitch and the evenness away from the edge. And there's the back there. You can see the stitch on the back too, but that won't matter later on because that's not going to be visible. The finger on the needle thing is just basically a safeguard. So as you're pulling the needle out towards yourself, you just sort of guard the tip of the needle with your finger. I've just sped this part of the video up a little bit, and in a minute I'm going to explain what to do if you've shortened your thread to the point where there's two strands together. So you have your thread folded over the needle, and at some point the part that's folded over will become even with the length of the thread. So all you need to do is just place it down gently and gently tug on each side just to see which one is the loose one. There you go. And now you'll want to pull the needle gently to stretch the thread out and shorten the sort of hanging strand so that you can continue on. I'm almost at the end of this row now, and I'm just going to push through the first stitch into the back and show you how I finish up and tie it off. So I'm going to sew through one of the little back pieces of the yellow and then leave a loop and sew through that to make a knot, and then I'm going to do that again. So through one of the yellow pieces, leaving a loop in the embroidery thread and threading through it, and pulling again, so I have 2 knots. I may make another one, or I may just start weaving through. So what I like to do now is, instead of snipping right there where the knot is, so the knot could come undone later, I weave through some of the other pieces that are showing in the back, and that leaves a little bit of extension on the embroidery thread, and then snip it there. So now the knot is less likely to come undone, and this piece will be hidden within the fabric. Now I'll remove these pins, place the pink felt flower on top, and choose the embroidery thread to use for this layer. A couple of pins again, and we're ready to go. This time I'm going to use the black embroidery thread, and it'll stand out beautifully against the pink. Again, wrapping around twice. I may need a little more for this one, but I'm going to start with 2 times because I'm going to be doing a blanket stitch within the design. A blanket stitch can be done on the outside edge of a project, and it can be done within it. Sometimes threading the needle can be tricky. Embroidery thread is quite thick, and if you haven't divided the threads, which is, I haven't divided the threads in this one, then it can be tricky to get it through the eye of the needle. I'm tying the knot now. One of the tricks is to snip the thread, dip your fingers in some water, and just wet the end of it and twist the threads so that they stay tight together, and then thread the needle. In here now I am threading into the yellow felt behind the pink so that I can hide this knot back there, and because I want to be right at the edge of the pink when I start my stitches. Then I'm going to place the needle down where I want the line of the second section to be, so it's sort of just over a little bit from where it's like a diagonal, basically. I've placed it through the pink in a diagonal from where it is. And now I'm going to come back through a little bit over from where it came out of the yellow area, but in line with where I placed it in the pink, and then making sure that I go through the loop that was sitting there, so it's sort of hooked into it. Now you'll see the pattern as we go along. So now I'm going to go diagonal again, so just next to the hole in the pink for the last bit, and then I am leaving that loop again. I'm going to leave that loop there, push the needle back through in line with the one that was diagonal, and loop it through that, and see how it pulls on that loop and sort of brings it over, so there's a nice edge at the top. Again, going through on a diagonal from where the thread came out, through to the back, leaving a loop, and pushing the needle back through in line with the one that was diagonal. I hope I'm explaining this properly, but thankfully you have the visual as well. So coming back through the loop again, and then checking it, there it is, and then placing the needle in on a diagonal from where it's coming out, leaving the loop again, going back through in line with the one that was placed on the diagonal, through the loop. I'm going to say this a few times because if you're new to this, it can seem really tricky until it clicks. So now I want to keep doing this all the way around the edges, and I'd like to make it as even as possible, meaning that all the little lines coming down are the same distance from the edge. So again, on the diagonal, and this time I accidentally pulled my loop through, so I'm just going to put my needle under and pull it back. You can do that. And then placing this one right on the edge of the pink in line with the one that was put on the diagonal. There you go. And pulling through. And then continuing around with this. Again, the needle goes through on the diagonal of the where it's coming out. There you go. And then coming back through at the top of the pink edge. And of course I pulled it through again there, but you can fix it this way too. So if you go through at the edge in line with it, and then put the needle under the loop, even though it was so small. Diagonal, leaving the loop, coming back through at the top of the pink, right in line with where the one that was diagonal was, and through the loop, again, diagonal, just one more time. So hope I get it right, because sometimes it gets caught on the fabric and sometimes I forget to leave the loop. There we go. So coming through there and through the loop, and there you go. You're starting to see a pattern now. So I'm going to fast forward some of this, and then we'll talk about tying it off afterwards. I love the way that looks against the pink fabric. So I've reached a point here where I'm actually running out of thread, so perhaps going around 3 times would have been better if using a blanket stitch, so that's something handy to know. So what I'm going to do is just sew into, on the diagonal, I'm just sewing into the back of the pink. And then getting the rest of the black embroidery thread. I'm going to tie this to the end of the short piece. This can be tucked now behind the pink patch. And just before the knot, there's a little bit of give, there's a little bit of extra thread, which is good because the little loop that is on the diagonal from the last stitch, I will be able to loop into it to create another blanket stitch. In order to do that, I'm going to need to sew through the yellow in the back here just a tiny bit and bring it through in line with the diagonal stitch that I last made. So it seems like I'm coming through from the back of the fabric. Got to carefully undo the knots. Sometimes new thread likes to bunch together. There we go. And so it just seems like I'm coming through from the back there and looping into that loop, giving this edge a bit of a seamless flow. I've just sped this up a little bit until we get to the tying off of the end of the thread. To finish up, I'm going to go into the first stitch on the diagonal, and this is going to line it all up nicely. Come back through to the top of the first stitch and through the final loop, creating that final top line and finishing it up. I'll just thread this into the back of the design, and similar to the yellow, I'm going to loop through some of the loops of the embroidery thread and create the knots again. So through the back of the stitch and through the loop, and then weaving it through a little bit to have that little extension on the thread, just to ensure the knot doesn't come undone. So there they are, the running stitch and the inside blanket stitch and the first 2 layers of this cute little hummingbird craft. It's fun to make your own felt craft kits. However, if you'd like to use this specific one, it is for sale in my art shop on Etsy called JanineLizaArtPrints. To find more arts and craft videos, please go to ArtWithJanineLiza YouTube. If you find something you'd like, please feel free to subscribe.